Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever wondered if the headlines you see every day are more than just politics, if they're actually the fulfillment of ancient prophecies written thousands of years ago? Today, we're diving into one of the most controversial and electrifying questions of our time. Are Israel and Iran playing out a drama foretold in the Bible itself? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you may never look at world events the same way again. The concept of biblical prophecy can seem like a relic of the past, a dusty collection of predictions scribbled centuries ago by ancient scribes in the deserts of the Middle East. Yet its relevance in today's world is undeniable, even astonishing. We are living in a time when tensions between nations are higher than ever, when ideologies clash across continents, and when the Middle East stands as the epicenter of many of these conflicts. Among the nations frequently in the headlines, two countries, Israel and Iran, dominate the conversation. They are nations with rich histories, deep spiritual roots, and a long-standing rivalry that often feels like it's teetering on the brink of war. But beyond politics and military maneuvers, beyond diplomatic negotiations and intelligence operations, there is a dimension of this conflict that some say has been foretold long before any of us were born. What if I told you that many students of Scripture believe this struggle is not merely about oil, influence, or national pride, but about something much bigger? What if they see in the ancient writings of the Bible the blueprint for a conflict destined to erupt in our time, a conflict involving Israel, Iran, and perhaps other nations? Today, I invite you to take a journey with me. Let's set aside preconceived notions. Let's approach these texts not as dusty relics, but as living documents that have shaped, and continue to shape, the world, you of millions. Whether you personally accept these prophecies as divine revelation, or whether you see them as historical curiosities, you will find it hard to deny how powerfully they resonate with the events unfolding before our eyes. To begin, we must first understand that biblical prophecy is not a monolithic concept. It spans centuries and dozens of authors. Some prophecies are highly symbolic, wrapped in poetic language and metaphor. Others are direct and concrete, naming cities, nations, and rulers. The Bible is full of such passages, some fulfilled in the past, some that believers claim are being fulfilled now, and some yet to be fulfilled. One of the key prophetic books is Ezekiel, written roughly 600 years ago during the Babylonian exile. The Book of Ezekiel contains a sweeping vision of Israel's future restoration and the judgment of its enemies. In Ezekiel 38 and 39, we find what is perhaps the most discussed and debated prophecy related to our topic today, the prophecy of Gog and Magog. Let me read you a portion of this text. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, set your face toward Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him. After many days you will be mustered. In the latter years you will go against the land that is restored from war, the land whose people were gathered from many peoples upon the mountains of Israel. In these verses, Gog is portrayed as a leader who will gather a coalition of nations to come against Israel in the last days. While the identities of these nations have been the subject of endless debate, some interpreters have drawn lines connecting ancient place names to modern nations. Magog is sometimes associated with Russia. Persia, clearly named in the passage, is the ancient name for modern-day Iran. Alongside Persia are other names, Cush, Put, Gomer, that scholars have connected to regions in Africa, Turkey, and Central Asia. The inclusion of Persia in this coalition is particularly striking. Iran is one of the oldest continuous civilizations in the world, with a history that stretches back thousands of years. Its name was officially changed from Persia to Iran in 1935. The fact that Ezekiel wrote down the name Persia centuries before modern geopolitics, is enough to make even the most skeptical reader pause and reflect. So, what does this mean in practical terms? For some, it means that any alliance between Russia and Iran has a prophetic dimension. They see the growing military cooperation between Moscow and Tehran, the arms deals, and the shared interest in countering Western influence as evidence that Ezekiel's prophecy is unfolding. Indeed, when we turn on the news and see Iranian leaders meeting with Russian officials, when we hear about Iran supplying drones and weaponry to various regional conflicts, it's not hard to understand why some people see biblical prophecy at work. But Ezekiel is not the only prophet whose writings fuel this discussion. Let's turn to the book of Isaiah. Isaiah lived in the 8th century B.C., a time when the Assyrian Empire threatened Israel and Judah. Yet many of Isaiah's prophecies look far beyond his own era. In chapter 34 we read, "For the Lord is enraged against all the nations, and furious against all their host. He has devoted them to destruction. For the Lord has a day of vengeance, a year of recompense for the cause of Zion." Though the immediate context involves Edom, a nation that no longer exists, some interpreters see a pattern here. They believe this passage prefigures God's judgment on all nations that oppose Israel. In this view, Iran's consistent hostility toward Israel is part of that pattern. Of course, interpretations vary widely. Some scholars prefer a more symbolic approach, seeing Gog and Magog as representations of general evil forces rather than specific modern nations. Others take a historicist perspective, arguing these prophecies were fulfilled in ancient times. Still, others hold that the ultimate fulfillment remains future, and that Israel's regathering in 1948 was the key turning point setting the stage for the final act. Whatever position one takes, it is hard to deny that the return of the Jewish people to their ancestral land has reignited interest in these ancient texts. For centuries, many believed such prophecies could never come to pass because Israel no longer existed as a nation. Yet in the aftermath of the Holocaust and World War II, the State of Israel was born. Suddenly, passages like Ezekiel 36 and 37, which speak of Israel's restoration, were no longer abstract promises but visible realities. This raises the stakes for any subsequent predictions about Israel's enemies gathering for war. If the restoration has happened, might the conflict also happen? Consider for a moment how this narrative shapes the mindset of millions of Christians, Jews, and even some Muslims around the world. To them, the Middle East is not merely a region of political turbulence. It is the stage upon which divine history is playing out. Every diplomatic maneuver, every rocket fired, every alliance signed, may be another step toward the fulfillment of prophecy. Let's examine, for example, the nuclear ambitions of Iran. Since the Islamic Revolution in 1979, Iran has openly declared its hostility to Israel, referring to it as the Little Satan. For decades, Iran's leaders have vowed to wipe Israel off the map. When you consider these threats alongside Ezekiel's description of a vast coalition attacking Israel like a cloud covering the land, the parallels are compelling. Iran's support of proxy groups, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, creates a regional network aimed at encircling Israel. Some analysts argue that these proxies function as the modern equivalent of the nations listed in Ezekiel's prophecy, multiple allies gathering for an attack. Meanwhile, Israel has spent billions of dollars on missile defense systems like Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow. Israeli military strategists are clear-eyed about Iran's intentions. They understand that Iran's nuclear program, if successful, could create an existential threat. The idea that Iran could eventually attempt to lead or inspire a coalition of nations against Israel is not merely a scriptural speculation. It is a scenario considered in Israel's defense planning. Yet prophecy does not only speak of conflict, it also speaks of deliverance. In Ezekiel 38 and 39, God intervenes dramatically. The text says, "I will summon a sword against Gog on all my mountains. With pestilence and bloodshed I will enter into judgment with him. I will show my greatness and my holiness, and make myself known in the eyes of many nations." For believers, this is the central point. The purpose of prophecy is not to create fear, but to show that God remains sovereign over history. Even when nations conspire against Israel, God promises deliverance. Some theologians caution against reading headlines too literally into the text. They warn that every generation has been tempted to declare that theirs was the generation of fulfillment. In the 19th century, Bible teachers thought Napoleon might be Gog. In the Cold War, it was the Soviet Union. Today, it is Russia and Iran. And yet, while caution is warranted, so is curiosity. The speed with which alliances are shifting and technology is advancing makes our time unique. We live in an era when a single missile or cyber attack could plunge entire nations into conflict overnight. This brings us to another layer of prophetic literature, the New Testament. In Matthew 24, Jesus speaks of wars and rumors of wars, of nations rising against nations, and of a time of unprecedented turmoil. The Apostle Paul, in 2 Thessalonians 2, describes a final rebellion led by the man of lawlessness. The book of Revelation paints an even more dramatic picture of global conflict culminating in Armageddon. For many Christians, these prophecies complement those of Ezekiel and Isaiah. They see Israel as the clock of prophecy. When Israel is reborn, when the nations gather against her, when Jerusalem becomes a cup of trembling for the world, then the end may be near. At the same time, it is important to remember that prophecy has always been interpreted differently across denominations and traditions. Some prefer a preterist view, believing many prophecies were fulfilled in the 1st century. Others take a futurist view, believing the climactic events remain ahead. Wherever you stand, you cannot deny the magnetic pull of these texts. They invite us to look beyond the headlines to consider deeper questions. What does it mean to be living in a time when ancient predictions seem to echo in modern conflicts? How should we respond, as people of faith or people simply curious about the intersection of religion and politics? So, to summarize, we've explored how the concept of biblical prophecy connects to Israel and Iran. We've seen how ancient texts like Ezekiel 38, Isaiah 34, and others seem to predict a coalition of nations, including Persia or modern Iran, gathering against Israel. We've looked at how current events, from Iran's military buildup to Russia's alliances, appear to fit this pattern. We've also acknowledged that interpretations vary. Not everyone agrees on what these prophecies mean or when they will be fulfilled. But the very fact that these questions are being asked by scholars, clergy, and ordinary people shows the enduring power of prophecy to shape how we see our world. If you have thoughts on this topic, I'd love to hear them in the comments below. If you're interested in learning more, be sure to check out our video on the end times, what you need to know. Thank you for watching, and for exploring these profound questions with me. Whatever your beliefs, may you find wisdom and understanding as you seek the truth about history, prophecy, and our shared future.